Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the October 20th meeting of the Stillwater Planning Commission. Do we need to do a voice roll call before we begin, or should we go ahead straight away?
Really for roll call.
Let me. Go ahead.
Mr. Rickelman,
Here.
Mrs. Phillips,
Present.
Mr. Shanahan, not joining us, Mrs. Jerome,
Present.
Mr. Allred.
Here.
Excellent. Thank you all. We'll begin with the public hearings. The first item for business is a land development use IH Development LLC final plat SUB 20-14, requesting review and approval for final plat of Park Valley Addition, create 329 new single-family residential lots on property currently addressed as 1823 West 26th and zone residential single-family small lot RSS. Perkins staff and staff presentation.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, Ryan Hart from Community Development. So this is a item that was brought to this meeting from the October 6th meeting where you originally heard the item. You may recall that subject property hatch area, the location of this development. Yellow polygon gives you a better view from the aerial perspective. So this would be long western looking north for 26th. So you'd be looking at the subject property from the south. This is at Western and 26th, so looking south along Western. So the subject property would be to your left of the image. And this is at Western and 26th, looking to the east along 26th. So the subject property would be on the right-hand side. With that said, preliminary plat was originally approved in May 2012. This first phase in the final plat, 58 unit section. See on the image here, one access off Western, going back to the inner part of the development, potential build out next phases, as well as potential connection to Fry Farms subdivision proposed south. So when all of this is at full build out, it would have connection 26, one to Western, as well as one into subdivision proposed to the south. Right now, the 58 unit first phase just has one connection off Western. The item was referred to this meeting by Planning Commission because the traffic impact analysis not being finished. Staff received that late Friday afternoon and just started to go through that. That in mind, staff have any questions you might have.
Do you have any questions for staff? Not seeing any questions for staff. So I guess we open for public hearing. Is anyone wishing to speak, or is the applicant or someone wishing to speak for the applicant available?
This is Chris Anderson with SMC Engineering. I'm representing the applicant.
Excellent, sir. Please go ahead if you'd like to say anything or make any remarks.
No, I was not at the last meeting. My partner Muhammad Khan filled in for me. He advised me about the issue with the traffic study. Has been submitted now. I think it's good. I don't know if the staff has had time to go through it. The main crux of the report, the summary basically says that through 2025 in the first phase that there's no issues with traffic, but at full build out of our project, the entire Fry Farms project to the south, and then the two other projects on the north side of of West 26th Street. At that point, in the east, they projected that to be around 2030. That at that point, there could be some issues at the intersection with Western and 26th. And at that time, and then they said that wouldn't even occur until the connection into Park Valley was made onto 26th Street. And at that time, that intersection needed to be looked at and evaluated. But with phase one, which is what we're considering today, there is no issue.
Are there any questions from the commission or the applicant? I'm not seeing any. So, sir, if you have, unless you have something else you'd like to say, we'll go on.
No, I'm good. I just request the approval of the plat this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in favor of the item? Please come forward, tell us your name. And Chris, did you give us your name and your address for the record? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Did you?
right.
Good. All right, thank you.
Yeah,
I was just looking back at my sheet. What am I supposed to ask for?
Christopher Anderson, SMC Consulting Engineers, 815 West Main, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma.
All right. Seeing no one else speaking in favor, is there anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to the item? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and ask for the staff alternatives, please.
Okay, so right now, staff issued, our findings haven't changed. As I mentioned, staff has just begun to read through the traffic impact analysis. So we have not through a thorough review of it at this time. Right now, we can tell you that at full build out, yes, it would meet subdivision and zoning requirements. At full build out, they would have 2 access points. Third, if you count the connection to Fry Farms to the south. You're looking at it for phase. This first phase would only have 1 connection. That would be west. Low density residential was recommended in this area in the comprehensive plan. It definitely meets that standard. With that in mind, in terms of alternatives, you can accept all the findings and you can recommend approval as presented. You can find the request is not appropriate, recommend denial. If you feel there's additional time needed for review or discussion, table the item to a particular date certain. In the case of the traffic analysis, staff is trying to get through it as fast as we can. So if you were to, for example, delay it 30 days or table it to the next planning commission meeting, that would be an example of an alternative. Any questions of staff about this item?
Not look to be any questions for you, sir. All right. Commissioners' discussion and or motion.
I move that we accept findings and approve the proposed preliminary plat as presented.
Okay, I believe it's a final plat. Did you mean final plat?
I was just reading in my notes and it still says preliminary, so. And I think we are on final, so yes. That's final on page 1 and preliminary on page.
Sorry, but I believe it's a final platting.
It is final. I amend that to final plat.
We have a second.
I can second that.
It has been moved and seconded that we accept the findings and recommend approval of the final plat. We will now vote.
Mr. Rickelman,
Yes.
Mrs. Phillips,
Yes.
Mrs. Jerome,
Yes.
Mr. Allred.
Yes.
4 yes.
Motion passes 4 yes, no, no. The next item on the agenda is plans, policies, and ordinances. We have a text amendment, PX 20-01 to chapter. Did I get it?
What?
Is everything okay, or do we get it too? Okay. Sorry, but text amendment PX 20-01 to chapter 23 Land Development Code, Article 8, Overlay District, Division 2, Special Purpose Overlay District, amending regulations for section 23-270 or 270 requirements, section 23-273 development standards, and section 23-274 duration of designation.
Brad,
Yes, sir.
that's Article 13, not 8.
Oh, thank you. My Roman numerals have failed me again. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Ryan Harkins, Community Development. This is the ordinance that came before you and then you originally approved at council and then now come back to planning commission at council request regarding the concept of streeteries or street eateries. This would be for the use of parking stalls to be utilized for food and beverage establishment in the community. Originally, what happened was we took the original overlay district and then tried to create extra opportunities. What council is looking at essentially is what they asked of staff was to go back, take a broader look and get some additional input. So we did some sessions via Zoom with stakeholders in the community, business interests, for example, as well as downtown interests and other businesses, created some revisions. And so this takes a bit broader approach. And what we did was create a section that deals with using parking, off-street parking for businesses, as well as temporary on-street parking, so 48 hours or less. So if business wanted to do something like a coffee shop or a bar just for game day, for example, there would be a section for that. There would also be a section for longer term type of use for food and beverage more than the hours to utilize this process. And then we tried to do some cleaning up of sidewalk dining type provisions that are already. So with that in mind, that is what is before you. It is essentially a revised but beefed up version of what we brought to you. Got a lot of good feedback from the community and try to incorporate that into this. So that was our purpose. And then, as I mentioned in the discussion, this is kind of what that we went through. Right now, there are specific things that are common to each of these type of uses or accessory uses. And then there are some that are specific to the off-street or just on-street temporary. Any questions staff can answer specifically at this point?
I do have a couple of questions, if I may.
Sure.
In reading through, it appears that for temporary on-street parking stalls, the materials that are allowed are slightly different than for the license for the longer period. Is that intentional?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yes. In section C, where it's addressing temporary on-street parking stalls not to exceed 48 hours, it appears that some of the physical barrier materials are slightly different in their listing than they are in section D, where it's the up to 6 months with an option to renew. Is that intentional to be different?
It was, and the reason being, the thought behind that was that short term, that 48 hours or less would be something, say, and I'll use Eskimo Joe's as an example. They right now under the mayor's emergency order use some movable fence type barriers to help with additional queue space in those on-street parking stalls, but they weren't actually seating people in them. And so that gave them something very flexible to come in, say the night before a game, put them up, and then take them down and move them very quickly, say about 2, 3, 4 hours after. So designed to be a little bit more flexible and easier to use. We know that there'll be some things we'll may have to work through once we get through the application with that. But initially we were trying to be as open and flexible as possible, especially with these more short-term options.
Okay, and that sounds reasonable. So I do have kind of following in that same vein, but in section D, looking at those materials, are the materials evaluated when the plans come in? So when the site plan comes in to be evaluated, is that also addressed? Because, and the reason I ask is earlier in this article, it talks about that there are certain materials that are prohibited on buildings. So I'm wondering if there's a review involved when we're looking at the up to 6-month license.
There would be, yes. And so tried to take the approach this that we've done currently with the emergency order, where an applicant would submit a site plan, indicate materials that they're using, and if they can give us any kind of sign as far as how they want that material to be used and where in each location, that helps us. And then if we still have questions, we'll follow up with them and work through that site plan in order to make it best thing possible fit their situation. Right now, what you see currently is, in some cases, Jersey barriers that have been borrowed, placed in those locations, or metal movable fence panels with black sheeting on it. So we're trying to avoid some of that look and do something that can be a little bit more permanent, that may fit in architecturally and aesthetically more to the surrounding environment.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, coming into this late, I wasn't involved in the first round, but it looks like a very very good amendment to the article, and I think it's something that would be great for Stillwater. So I was really pleased to read through this. I have one little typo that I caught, and I just wanted to verify. Also in section D, in item 12, and I'll read the sentence. The use of umbrellas, lighting, outdoor heaters, or other amenities is, and I think that's supposed to be encouraged and not encourages, so long as they do not pose a fire or tripping hazard.
That would be correct.
Okay, very good. That's all I have. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Hearing none, we will open the public hearing and ask for those who wish to speak in favor of the item. If anyone wishing to speak in favor of the item. Hearing none, do we have anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the item? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing and ask for staff's alternative.
So with regard to alternative, the findings that we've issued with this and not change, in order to do all of these accessory uses related to it, we will have to do a code and text amendment. So this not only sets out how it can be done in design standards, but also where our zoning district speed limit. Currently, it's only allowed in very specific geographical area, and then only if other ordinances kick in, this changes that. With that in mind, you can accept findings and recommend the council approve the text amendment as been proposed to you in a revised format. Find it appropriate with identified amendments, and then specify what those amendments are. You find that it is not necessary and recommend denial, or that you can table this item if you feel additional discussion. Table it to a date certain for planning. With that said, questions of staff?
I guess my only question is insofar as it was the city council who said that they were dissatisfied with the previous version, do you feel like you have adequately answered whatever questions since they didn't provide us any listing of what they had? Do you feel like this satisfies whatever it is that they were looking for?
Staff does, based on one, feedback we got from council right away after that meeting, and then two, the feedback we've gotten from community stakeholders, whether they be downtown or other commercial areas, as well as from what bigger community stakeholders like the chamber. So I think we're where it needs to be to give people a good start.
Any other questions by the commission or a motion?
I would move that we accept staff's findings and recommend to the city council to approve the proposed text amendment as presented.
I second.
It has been moved and seconded that we accept staff's findings and recommend city council for approval. We will now vote.
Mr. Rickelman,
Yes.
Mrs. Phillip,
Yes.
Mrs. Jerome,
Yes.
Mr. Allred,
Yes.
4 yes.
The motion passes 4 yes to no. The next item is a text amendment, TXT 20-03 to Chapter 23 Land Development called Article 5, Use Categories and Limitations, Division 1, generally, Section 23-137, RSS Small Lot Single Family Residential, and Section 23-153 CG Commercial General District. Staff.
So this is another item that originally went to council, and then after being reviewed by planning, given a recommendation of approval, council has remanded this one back to planning commission as well after review by staff and a discussion visions. So the original ordinance and text amendment had a use added to the permitted use of cemeteries and associated facilities to the RSS zoning district, as well as general accommodation added to general commercial zoning. Because of timing of some of the development, city council remanded back to planning commission and asked staff to review things and make some changes. And so the changes that we've made are to hold off on the general commercial zoning change, adding that use, but to go forward with the RSS zoning district addition of cemeteries and their associated facilities, but not as a permitted use, but adding it as a specific use, that zoning district. So that's what's before you tonight. Currently, as before, if you may remember, cemeteries are not allowed as permitted or a specific use in the RSS zoning district. In fact, that type of use is not allowed anywhere in the zoning. There's no zoning district to accommodate that. So cemetery on the east side of town along 6th Avenue is essentially sitting in RSS zoning as a non. So this would bring it into conformance with the zoning code and then allow them to, with use permit, any expansion in the future, give them that opportunity. What we did after this went to council was sit down with council's feedback, their thoughts, we'll sit down with folks from the cemetery, work through some revisions. The manager's office as well as legal has reviewed this and they're okay with everything. That's why it's back tonight. With that, any questions, staff?
Does this change allow the location to be able to go forward with whatever it is that they were doing? Is this sufficient?
It should, yeah. Right now, they are looking at trying to add on space and do a new building. A discussion with property owners about taking on some of that land and having some land donated to the cemetery so they can put in a new building, accessory building for storage and function and office space. So this would give them that potential to do that. Being an SUP, there would be the public application process, so it would come before you as well as city council ultimately, but it gives them a process to move forward and do that.
Any other questions first? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and go to the open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the item, please make so notice. You can tell there's no one there on the Zoom calls. Is there anyone in opposition to the item who wishes to? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and ask for staff's recommendation. We can't hear you, Ryan. There you go.
My apologies.
Oh, no. Great.
I clicked it once and then it didn't. So right now, the RSS zoning district does not allow this use. This would essentially allow it to have a way forward to the compliant zoning code forward. Text amendment has been looked at once by council, remanded to you, and then revised to meet council wishes. We feel like we've got that essentially taken care of. So with that, you can accept staff's findings and recommendation and recommend approval of the text amendment to council, and recommend denial, recommend approval with modifications if you desire that, or you can table the item to a date certain if you feel additional discussion or information is needed. Any questions of staff?
Seeing no questions, is there any discussion from the commission or a motion?
I move that we accept findings and recommend city council approve the proposed text amendment as presented.
I'll second.
It has been moved and seconded that we accept the findings and recommend that city council approve as presented. We will now vote.
Mr. Rickelman,
Yes.
Mrs. Phillip,
Yes.
Mrs. Durham,
Yes.
Mr. Allred.
Yes.
4 yes.
The motion passes 4 yes to no. The next item is miscellaneous items from staff, commissioners, or city attorney. Next planning commission meeting of November 3rd. We have a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adjourn next meeting on November 3rd. We'll now vote.
Mr. Rickelman,
Yes.
Mrs. Phillip,
Yes.
Mrs. Durham,
Yes.
Mr. Allred.
Yes.
4 yes.
The motion passed. Excellent. Thank you all once again this evening.
Aye.